Hey everyone, this is Christopher Luxon, the former CEO of Air New Zealand.
This is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire.
This is Tracy Ibarra. I'm in Executive Solutions at Dell Technologies.
This is Travis Chappell, founder of Build Your Network. If you are wanting to learn how to embrace change,
To navigate through disruption as a leader,
then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast.
The Leadership is Changing podcast.
the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend,
my very good friend, Denis I.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis I.
Hey, welcome to the show, Leadership is Changing. What we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Leaders everywhere confront similar obstacles because people are people. But everywhere you go, leaders are overwhelmed, disrupted, and under pressure. They run from email to email, meeting to meeting. Many leaders are not changing quick enough, which means they run the risk of becoming irrelevant and being left behind. The purpose of the show is taking our listeners' leadership to another level by finding their balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. I believe we don't have enough effective leaders in the world today, and if we can get the leaders to step up and lead change, then they can inspire real change. Hey listeners, it's now time to adapt in our fast-moving world, and I want to welcome you to a Ask Denis episode, which is a freestyle episode that I have here for you today in today's session. I'm asked questions by our listeners, or I share my thoughts, insights, and experiences from working with leaders around the globe. Hey listeners, welcome to today's show. And if you haven't already check out the Facebook group, the community, Leadership is Changing. We'd love to see you there. So feel free to join that group and share your insights, thoughts about leadership, about change, about the mindset, all sorts of other topics that we have in relation to leadership is changing. Hey, I've just released episode 64, 65, and 66, which was a 3-part series around the 6 ways to accelerate action for change. And if you haven't already checked those out, go and check those episodes out, part 1, part 2, and part 3. And really, really cool stuff in what I've shared. But I'm also sharing with you there on those episodes a bonus way, a 7th one. And it's in relation to the mindset. So go and check that out if you haven't already done that. Hey, today I want to talk to you about consistency is key. And we're going to be talking about that. And in particular, what people are looking for today is a leader that is strong, a leader that is confident, a leader that knows where they are going and can take that organization forward. With what's going on around the world in relation to pandemics and other changes happening, people look to leadership for that strength. They want the leaders to be like a rock. They want the leaders to be know where they're going, but they want people or leaders to be consistent. Nothing worse than actually having somebody who's giving mixed messages or somebody who's all over the place and are not consistent. And so what I'm going to do today is just talk to you about those different things around being consistent and what are some important things to put in place for us to be consistent, but also to show that strength, that confidence, that executive presence up front of our organization. Many executives today are looking at the business they're in. Are they in the right business today? Second thing is, do they have the right organizational structure to support that business? And then the third thing is, do they have the right leadership team in place, in the right places, in the right roles to help support the organization, to help support the business move forward? And the thing here is this: whatever leadership team you have in place today, whatever your values are, your mission, whatever your strategy is, consistency is the key. People are looking at messaging, and I'm going to go through some of these things here to cover off, but one of them is messaging. The message needs to be clear, concise, on point, but it needs to be simple. And if you can make a message that is on point, simple, and clear, people will more than likely buy into it quicker than if it's not. If it's confusing, you'll lose people. If it's confusing, there will be people who are indifferent or won't buy into it or don't agree with it. In fact, they don't even see the value of it. However, if you are consistent in your messaging, not only you as, say, the executive or the owner or the entrepreneur or the leader of the business, but your whole leadership team is consistent as well. If you're all on the same page and the messaging out to the organization is always constant, if the message is out to the customers, the stakeholders, the shareholders, if it is consistent, then that's really going to help. Consistency is key, in particular when you start giving out messaging. We've all seen leaders who give out messaging because, as John Maxwell says, as the author and speaker, he talks about everyone can communicate, few can connect. And it's the connecting piece that's really important. That's the piece that people are looking for. And if you are consistent in your messaging, the way that you actually, not only just what you say, but how you say it, that's really going to help people. People will buy into it. People will go with you on that journey. What people are also looking for is a leader that is consistently transparent, authentic. And they're a person who not only talks about things, but walks the talk. What I want to say here is you'll see organizations whereby there will be a leader who will say one thing and then do something different, or they are consistently changing their mind or changing the messaging, changing the approach, and it becomes confusing for people. And so if it's consistent, then that's really important. The other thing too is it adds value. And what I mean by that is this. If you think about it from an entrepreneur perspective or somebody who's got a digital footprint and doing quite a lot of work on the digital space, if your messaging is consistent, if you're being consistent, if you're adding value consistently, then that's what people are wanting. Nothing worse than it being confusing and people not knowing where you're coming from or understanding your messaging. So that's really, really important, and it plays a role in many areas other than just what I've talked about leadership. The other thing could be also in relation to your actions, how you're doing things, how you're coming across and the things that you're doing, what you are doing. If you're consistent in all those different areas, that's a great thing. But once again, in that space, if you're changing or you're not sure, and even if you give a little bit of doubt, then that actually starts to cause confusion. It actually starts to cause a bit of a void. And if you are providing a void, in other words, if you're not providing all the messaging or everything you're doing is not filling that void, then what happens is that people will fill the void themselves. And that's where you get gossip. That's where you get, nowadays, they call it fake news, and you get all sorts of things happening. And a lot of that gossip and all that is because people want to fill the void because it's lacking. So actions is really important as well. So you as a strong leader, being strong, confident, having that presence up front is really important. Having your messaging clear, consistent, simple, on point, but the same on a regular basis, and being consistent with that, that's really important. The next one would be action, how you're doing things, how you're coming across, what you are doing. All those things need to be consistent as well. What's really interesting here is that if you are listening well, that's going to really help too. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, that's an interesting one. Because you see, listening is a skill set. But not everyone, as a leader, an executive, an entrepreneur, they don't always listen. They listen to what they want to hear sometimes. And sometimes they're not even present with you. They might be there listening, but they're not even listening to what you're actually saying. So the key here, team, is from a consistent basis, listen to what people are saying, but also listen to what they're not saying. If you can actually understand what people are actually saying, whether it be words, actions, whatever they're doing, then that's actually going to put you into a better position as a leader. but you need to do it on a consistent basis. And I've seen some very successful leaders who take the time to actually listen to people. They actually get very good at asking questions. And so that's another consistency thing too. If you can get very good at thinking about questions, but coming up or asking quality questions, then that's going to be key for your success as well. However, sometimes you might even need to have courage or be bold in some of those things. Whatever it is, be consistent in what you do, in your approach, and so forth. That's going to help you succeed in whatever you do, in whatever role that you play, whatever business that you're going to do. The other thing I would say here is that as a leader, whatever you do, stay consistent. If you are somebody who has a business and you're becoming a leader in your industry in the sense of, let's just take this podcast as an example. The podcast needs to be consistent. If your listeners are expecting certain things from you, and if you say that you're going to roll out episodes, 3 times, 2 times a week, then be consistent. If you start, stop, then listeners are not sure what you're actually doing. They can't really rely on your side of things. It's the same with actually going out and posting on social media. Or if you're going out to your organization with a newsletter, announcements, town halls, as sometimes some organizations call it. If you have a cadence, then make sure that you are sticking to that. A communication plan, a marketing plan, something that actually allows you to plan is vital in you being consistent. Because you see, once you have a plan, you understand what you need to be doing and you understand what you need to do and when, then you're going to be setting yourself up for success. Most people don't have a plan, and then what happens is that they end up sort of just throwing mud on the wall and see what sticks, or they just poke it with a stick, as I call it. In other words, they try it over here and they try it over there, and they just see what's working. But what people are looking for is consistency. And if you stay consistent, it's amazing what happens. There will be a tipping point somewhere where things start to really flow for you. And I've seen many leaders over the years who have done very well. At times that they've struggled and we've stepped back to review and reflect on things, it comes back to several things. 1, they're not actually planning. 2, they don't actually step back and think. 3, they're not giving themselves that space to think. 4, when they do think, do they come up with an action plan? Some do, some don't. And if they do come up with an action plan, do they execute well? And even the execution piece, you've got to be consistent on that as well. So that's the consistency goes and lays across all different levels and all different silos or different areas that you need to actually focus on. The other thing too is about fitness, because this show talks about executive excellence, but also your personal well-being. So if you're consistent in the way that you eat, in the way that you drink water, in the way that you exercise on a regular basis, then you're going to be in a more of a healthy mind, healthy situation, healthy body, to be out there to bring your A game to the field. Now, if you're not consistent in that area, then for a lot of you, you find that hard. A, you feel sluggish, and B, you're not doing something that you're signing up to. And so you don't always feel that great. At the end of the day here, team, it all comes down to being consistent by setting yourself up for success. And if you can set yourself up for success on a consistent basis, then you should see consistent results. Now, don't get me wrong, there'll be times where things may not go well, and of course, that's where we learn from it. There's another consistent thing on that. If you can review, reflect, learn from different situations, and then do something with that learning on a consistent basis, then you'll see some success. So here, at the end of the day, team, what I'm talking about is that consistency is key. It doesn't matter what you are doing. If you keep being consistent, keep adding value, keep doing it at a very high level, if you keep being disciplined consistently, having that focus consistently, then a sum of all of that will bring some great success to you. Just know that it is not easy to do. It's easy for me to talk about here and easy to say, but it does take work in being consistent. But then you need to be consistent with the work. So you see how it all plays out again? So team, whatever you do, make a decision. Whatever you do, plan well, step back, think about it, and then put an action plan and execute on that plan very well. If you do that, consistency will be your friend. Consistency will actually help you do things, and everyone else around you will be happy in the sense that they'll see a very confident leader, a strong leader, somebody they can hang on to on their coattails, and they can go with you on the journey of being successful. Team, it's a pleasure always being with you, and thanks for joining me on the Ask Denis episode today. Once again, go to our Facebook group, Leadership is Changing. It's a great community, great people are joining, and look forward to seeing you there very soon. Hey, listeners, what we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Change is incredibly scary, especially with the unknown and the unfamiliar territory. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing. Look out for the episodes as they've been released. Download them, have a listen, put a review and a rating. If there's any feedback you'd like to give me on the show, or if there's any questions you'd like me to ask my guests as I interview them, or if you have a question for Denis on the Ask Denis episode, then feel free to send me an email, dennis@leadingchangepartners.com. Hey team, thanks for joining me. Until next time, we'll talk again soon. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.